Mainland Kryptonians. Did someone accidentally clone millions of Henry Cavill lookalikes? Welcome to the standard issue alien demographic that basically built the entire Kryptonian brand. These folks originated right on the primary continental landmasses of the planet Krypton. They constructed and lived inside the most famous super cities you always read about in comic books. We're talking about massive futuristic places like Kryptonopolis, Kandor, and Argos City. Physically speaking, these mainlanders look identical to standard Caucasian humans on Earth. They have the exact same internal organs, fair skin tones, diverse eye colors, and basic body structures. You could easily pass one on the street without batting an eye. However, their underlying cellular design operates on a totally insane cosmic scale. When they hang out under a red dwarf sun like Rao, they act completely ordinary. They get sick, stub their toes, and get tired just like standard Earth humans. Change the lighting to a yellow star though, and everything goes wild. Their cells absorb that sweet solar energy like ultra-powered organic batteries. These, suddenly, everyday mortals gain godlike powers, including flight, invulnerability, laser eyes, cold breath, and absurd strength. Society on the mainland was controlled by an intensely rigid caste system under the watchful eye of the Science Council. Everyone got sorted into specific divisions like the Science Guild, Military Guild, Artist Guild, and Religious Guild. Later on in modern continuity, a creepy artifact called the Eradicator messed up their genetic code permanently. This weird device bound everyone to the planet on a molecular level. Any mainland citizen who tried to leave the planet would instantly drop dead. Because? Xenophobia. This forced evolution turned their civilization into a cold, emotionless, super isolated place where normal baby making was completely replaced by artificial cloning vats. Famous examples include Kal-El, who became Superman, his father Jor-El, and his cousin Kara Zor-El and General Drew Zod. Sadly, all that impressive cosmic science could not stop their own planet from exploding like a cheap firecracker. The Vathloins. Who said every single person on Krypton had to look like a direct relative of Clark Kent? Enter the Vathloins, an incredibly cool demographic originating from a geographically isolated region known as Vathlo Island. When looking at their overall physical features, Vathloians mirror Earth humans of African descent, sporting dark skin tones and textured hair. This specific group made their formal debut during the Bronze Age of comics in Superman issue 234. Back then, the writers included Vathlo Island as an independent nation that kept its distance from the main continental government. They shared the exact same solar absorption biology as the mainland folks, meaning they also turned into godlike beings under yellow sunlight. However, these islanders preferred to keep their distance from the cold, homogenized culture run by the Central Science Council. In modern eras like the Earth 52 and Rebirth, writers expanded Vathlo Island into a thriving scientific utopia. They actually led Krypton's golden age of space exploration before the rest of the planet became super isolated and weird. Thanks to their geographic distance, they developed unique architecture, cool philosophies, and vibrant social structures. They focused heavily on true communal progress instead of relying on sterile cloning vats and rigid caste systems. The most prominent hero connected to this location is Calvin Ellis, the awesome Superman of Earth 23. He serves as the President of the United States while simultaneously saving the multiverse as an absolute powerhouse. His roots trace back to the rich history of Vathlo Island. Honestly, moving away from the mainstream mainland culture was probably the smartest decision any Kryptonian ever made. The Twex Kryptonians. Have you ever wondered what was happening at the bottom half of Krypton while everyone else argued in Kandor? Meet the Twex Kryptonians, a distinct ethnic group inhabiting the southern hemispheric landmass known as the continent of Twex. Comic book cartographers designed this massive region to foster populations resembling Earth folks of East Asian, Middle Eastern, Indigenous, and Latino descent. The local landscape was widely diverse, featuring vast deserts, dense crystal forests, and extremely violent ocean coastlines. Living in these harsh environments forced the Twex people to develop a deeply symbiotic relationship with the natural world around them. Unlike the sterile cities of Kryptonopolis or Kandor, their regional architecture seamlessly integrated natural rock formations and giant crystalline growths. Their sprawling settlements looked organic and grown rather than artificially built by cold industrial machines. Historically, the people of Twanks made massive contributions to ancient Kryptonian art, deep philosophy, and detailed historical archiving. Naturally, their spiritual traditions constantly clashed with the strict logic-driven rules enforced by the rigid Science Council up north. Eventually, they were subjected to the exact same planetary laws and genetic tampering caused by the Eradicator artifact. Even so, Twanks culture preserved ancient traditions that the mainlanders had completely forgotten or outlawed centuries ago. Because comic book stories usually focus on the House of El, Twanks exist mostly as an awesome world building for background lore. Consequently, there are very few spotlighted individual characters from this continent in the primary comic continuity. Ignored completely. Turns out having rich spiritual traditions and gorgeous crystal homes cannot save you from bad comic book writers. The Daxamites. What happens when classic Kryptonian DNA gets mixed with an intense cosmic paranoia and a fatal metal allergy? You get the Daxamites, a famous genetic offshoot with the history filled with space travel and tragic biological flaws. Thousands of years before Krypton exploded, bold explorers left their homeworld during a great era of space expansion. One specific group of adventurous space travelers landed on a distant planet called Daxam, which, just like Krypto, orbited a red dwarf star named Rao. Over many millennia, these isolated colonists adopted in their new world and built an aggressively secretive society. A tragic conflict called the Tsar of Daxam turned the population into total xenophobes who hated all extraterrestrial life. They banned space travel and brutally executed any foreign visitors who dared to land on their home planet. Biologically, Daxamites are basically identical to standard Kryptonians, meaning they absorb yellow solar radiation to gain incredible godlike powers. Under a yellow sun, they fly around with super strength, invulnerability, and heat vision just like Superman. However, evolutionary divergence created one massive biological difference that completely changes the game. Mainland Kryptonians get instantly weakened and killed by irradiated glowing rocks from their destroyed homeworld called Kryptonite. Daxamites don't care about Kryptonite at all, but they suffer from a completely fatal allergy to ordinary lead. Even microscopic exposure to basic lead causes horrific cellular decay and swift death unless treated by Brainiac 5. Their most famous hero is Mon-El, a legendary spacefaring powerhouse. Imagine being able to punch a planet into dust only to get it instantly vaporized by an old pencil. The Philosians. Ever wondered what happened to ancient Kryptonians who left the planet before the Eradicator locked the doors? Well, say hello to the Philosians, an ancient biological offshoot introduced during the epic War World saga inside Action Comics. Tens of thousands of years ago, a massive colonial expedition of Kryptonite scientists and families set sail into the cosmos. They boarded a giant generational vessel to build a peaceful new home far away from mainland politics. Unfortunately, their ship got violently intercepted by an ancient cosmic tyrant named Mongol. The survivors were dragged to Warworld, a brutal gladiatorial planet engine run by cruel warlords. Trapped for millennia beneath artificial star forges, the Philosians evolved in complete isolation from the rest of Kryptonian culture. Genetically, they are undeniably Kryptonian, meaning they absorb yellow solar energy to unlock wild superhuman abilities. However, thousands of years of horrific enslavement and harsh breeding conditions subtly changed their physical features and culture. They completely dropped the traditional Kryptonian language and created a unique dialect known as Valkyrie. Additionally, they developed a deeply spiritual warrior culture centered around the legendary myth of Superman. They viewed him as a prophesied savior who would eventually fall from the sky to free them from tyranny. Their physical appearance features striking tribal scarification and incredible physical resilience forged through endless hardships. When Kal-El finally arrived on Warworld, he teamed up with his lost cousins to overthrow the evil Mongol. Prominent examples include the brave young hero twins named Othro Ra and Osul Ra. Nothing says family reunion quite like fighting through a brutal gladiatorial death arena together under artificial sunlight. There are Kryptonians. Did anyone seriously think Krypton was always a boring planet full of cold scientists wearing giant silver shoulder pads? Meet the Urkolians, a fiercely independent subrace hailing from Urkol, the absolute oldest known city-state built long before the planet ever had a unified government. Thousands of years before the Cold Science Council took control, the Krypton was a fractured, violent world split between competing city-states. The cities of Urkol developed a distinct physical, military, and cultural identity forged entirely through brutal siege warfare, amazing architecture, and fanatical sun worship. Biologically speaking, these ancient warriors were completely identical in cellular design to any standard Kryptonian you see flying around today. However, their harsh lifestyle, environmental conditioning, and proud royal lineage set them completely apart as a hardened, fiercely independent population. They fought in centuries of cataclysmic wars against rival cities like neighboring Louvrian, constantly reshaping the geopolitical landscape of ancient Krypton. Their culture featured heavily fortified crystal spires, ornate bio-armor, and a brutal society hierarchy rooted in military power rather than scientific isolation. Unlike the sterile, emotionless society of modern Krypton, Urkolian culture was extremely passionate, violent, and deeply invested in oral traditions and giant sculptures. As centuries passed and Krypton transitioned towards a centralized planetary government run by scientists, the distinct identity of Urkol was eventually suppressed and absorbed. Even so, their ancient bloodlines remained a proud foundational pillar of overall Kryptonian history and ancestry. Turns out that wearing shiny metal bio-armor and worshipping the sun god Ra is a great way to build a classic legacy. The Lurvian Kryptonians. Did you really think the ancient city of Urkol managed to conquer the entire planet without facing any serious opposition? Enter the Lurvan Kryptonians, an ancient, highly sophisticated subrace native to the legendary city-state of Lurvan during Krypton's early fractured era. Thousands of years before the Central Science Council ever established a global government, Lurvan stood as Urkol's greatest cultural and political rival. The citizens of Lurvan built a deeply prosperous civilization focused on advanced monumental architecture, early technological development, and deep cosmic astronomy. Biologically speaking, these early city dwellers possessed the exact same photonucleic energy cellular matrix as every other standard Kryptonian across history. However, their ancestral environment and proud cultural traditions created a demographic known for supreme intellectual pride and incredible tactical discipline. They engaged in massive century-long geopolitical wars against the Urkol, fighting relentless battles that reshaped the early landscapes of their homeworld. Their culture championed grand scientific advancement and strategic military defense, erecting massive fortified city walls and ornate crystalline energy towers. Unlike the later sterile, emotionless mainland society, Lurvan culture was deeply vibrant, passionate, and heavily invested in preserving epic planetary history. When Krypton eventually unified under a single government, Lurvan was peacefully integrated into the mainland, eventually serving as a foundation for Kryptonopolis. Lara Laravan, the biological mother of Superman, represents the most prominent descendant carrying the prestigious honor of this ancient bloodline. Giving birth to the most iconic superhero in the entire universe is definitely one way to win an ancient city rivalry. The Bokos Kryptonians. Have you ever wondered where the absolute worst rule breakers on Krypton went when they wanted to avoid government trouble? They sailed right on over to the island continent of Bokos, famously known across planetary history as the notorious Isle of Thieves. Located far across roaring seas from immaculate mainland cities like Kandor and Kryptonopolis, Bokos developed a wildly different way of living. Because the Central Science Council struggled to protect authority over such distant and treacherous island terrain, Bokos became a giant haven for outlaws. It hosted political descendants, illegal traders, and renegades who completely rejected the strict predetermined guild system enforced on the mainland. Phenotypically, these islanders shared the exact same physical traits and solar absorption capabilities as their standard mainland counterparts. However, their subculture was defined by amazing maritime skills, underground black markets, and an outright refusal to use artificial gestation vats. While mainlanders viewed the citizens of Bokos as dangerous criminals, the islanders considered themselves the only true free people on the planet. Their settlements were sprawling, chaotic labyrinths built out of salvaged ship holes, subterranean sea caves, and repurposed industrial scrap metal. Economically, they survived on illicit trade, deep sea harvesting, and contraband distribution, supplying banned tech and art to mainland political rebels. A notable character example from the lawless region is Tor-El, an infamous smuggler who constantly defied draconian laws in classic comics. Living in a messy pirate village made of broken spaceships definitely beats sitting inside a cold, sterile cloning lab all day. The Kryptonians. What happens when your next door planetary neighbor looks just like you, acts super aggressive, and shares your exact superpowers? You get the Kryptonians, a closely related sister species residing on Deron, a planet orbiting the exact same red giant star named Rao. While not natively born on Krypton itself, Kryptonians share the common ancestral origin from early eras of comic seeding in that space sector. In comic book history, the close proximity of Deron and Krypton led to a blood history of interplanetary conflict known as the Krypton-Deron Wars. Kryptonians possessed an almost identical physiological structure to standard Kryptonians, allowing them to absorb yellow solar radiation and gain godlike powers. However, their home planet was far harsher and more volatile, forcing an evolutionary path that made them physically denser and extremely warlike. Their society was structured on brutal marital houses and orbital warfare, viewing the arrogant Kryptonians with deep disdain and intense jealousy. Their bloody wars involved massive orbital bombardments and planetary blockades before a fragile, extremely tense truce was finally established. When exposed to yellow sunlight, the Kryptonian gains flight, invulnerability, laser vision, and an insane physical strength just like Superman himself. A prominent character example of this warlike sister demographic is Tyrell, a ruthless warrior who fought against the Kryptonian forces during historical clashes. Having a hyper-aggressive neighbor who gets godlike abilities under yellow sun sounds like a total nightmare for cosmic space safety. The Kryptonian human hybrids. What takes place when you mix pure Kryptonian godlike biological code with everyday Earth human DNA under bright yellow sun? You create the Kryptonian human hybrids, a modern biological offshoot formed through the precise combination of two completely different planetary genetic codes. Historically, standard Kryptonian biology was considered incompatible with human genetics due to major differences in chromosomal density and cellular energy storage. However, when these two genetic codes successfully merge, the resulting hybrid processes a highly adaptive physiology with an incredible evolutionary potential. Hybrids absorb yellow solar radiation at an exceptionally efficient rate, often developing powers like super strength, flight, and heat vision very early. In some specific hybrid lines, human brain chemistry combines with solar energy yields unique powers like tactile telekinesis. This lets them manipulate an invisible force field around their bodies to simulate flight, invulnerability, and the telekinetic dismantling of complex machines. Culturally, hybrids exist as bridge figures between two worlds, lacking ancient Kryptonian baggage while embodying the true heroism of Earth. The two most famous character examples are Jonathan Samuel Kent, the natural son of Superman and Lois Lane, and Connor Kent, also called Kon-El. Connor was genetically engineered by splicing the DNA of Superman with human DNA from Lex Luthor inside a secret lab. Combining cosmic solar battery cells with human emotional depth is basically the ultimate recipe for creating an absolute dynamic superhero. Well, that's it for this one. If you liked the video, hit that like button. Subscribe for more and ring the bell so you never miss a drop. Craving more stories from comics, movies, and beyond? Check out this video right here. Cheers, and see you in the next one.